Perceive, process, perform. Do you need inspiration for your practice? Or do you simply need to practice inspiration? With this series, we aim to do both. Give us 15 minutes and we'll give you practice inspiration. A challenge many of us face is convincing our patients to accept the comprehensive dental treatment that we all know will improve their quality of life. It's not always easy to get patients to understand the ultimate impact comprehensive treatment will have on their lives. With this presentation, Dr. Peter Fay shares his tips on getting to yes.
Hi, my name's Peter Fay. I'm a prosthodontist who's had the pleasure of living and practicing on the island of Maui in Hawaii for the past going on 30 years now. I'm also the director of the Maui Postgraduate Dental Forum. For the last decade or so, I've had the pleasure of traveling around the country speaking to Seattle study clubs on today's topic, getting to yes, helping patients choose comprehensive dentistry. Now my first question when I'm in the audience is always, why is this topic relevant to me and my Seattle study club and our members? Well, many years ago, when Michael Cohen first graduated perio school, set up his practice, he wanted to find a way to market the dentist that was a little different than usual. So he decided to form a study club. And he figured that if he could help restorative dentists do exam, diagnose, treatment plan, and deliver more comprehensive interdisciplinary dentistry, then the patient would win because they'd get the dentistry, the dentist would win assuming they wanted to do that kind of dentistry, and Michael would win indirectly because the dentist would need his periodontal and implant skills for the interdisciplinary part. And so that core of promoting interdisciplinary dentistry is what has started in that original Seattle Study Club and is now the same core principle that has evolved into this huge Seattle Study Club network. So I think the topic is relevant for Seattle Study Clubs and members. Sort of to confirm that, I went to a Seattle Study Club symposium for directors many years ago, and during those 2.5 days, I heard directors from all over the country sort of have a common complaint. And they voiced it a number of different ways, but one guy from Texas said it like this, and I wrote it down. He said, how do I get my members to actually start being able to do more comprehensive care? And so it just sort of confirmed for me that this topic is relevant to dentists in general, and particularly to dentists in the Seattle Study Club network, because that's sort of the core principle. So one way we do this with our members is we hold the famous Seattle Study Club treatment planning sessions. And in it, somebody will bring a case, or you can get a prepackaged case from Seattle Study Club headquarters, the CaseFlex. But they bring a case, and we have the models and the x-rays and the charting and the photos and whatever else. And we break into groups, and we do an exam and then a diagnosis on the patient. And then we formulate treatment plans, sometimes go for it treatment plans, sometimes there's parameters set. And then once we do that, the groups each give their own treatment plans, and it's a great way to learn a lot quick because there's a lot of people talking about all the different facets of the case. And if the case is completed, then we also get to see what was actually done. And so we go very smoothly from exam to diagnosis to treatment plan to actually putting it in the patient's mouth. And this is how it can work in your practice for relatively small cases, for a few hundred to a few $1,000s. Last year, Mrs. Jones broke off the mesiobuccal cusp with number 19. She ended up with a crown. This year she calls, says, the same thing happened on the tooth on the other side. I broke off the corner. I need a crown. How quick can you get me in? And your schedules, if they're good, they massage or stretch the schedule, fit Mrs. Jones in. She comes in, you look at her mouth. Yes, you broke the corner of the tooth off. Yes, we need to do a crown. And we happen to have time to do it today if you're available. Oh yes, thank you very much. I don't want to miss any more work. And so in literally 60 seconds, you go from exam to diagnosis to treatment plan to case presentation to case acceptance to sticking a needle in her mouth and numbing her up to get going right then. And this is, again, the way it can flow in our practices for relatively small cases, a few hundred to a few $1,000s. But once we move into the realm of a few thousand to many tens of thousands of dollar cases, there's a disconnect here. It just doesn't flow bang, bang, bang. In fact, I think it's not only a linear disconnect, I think it's more like this, that there's a hump. And I call this hump Mount Yes. And the bigger the case, the more complicated, the more time and money that's going to have to be invested by the patient, the more interdisciplinary the higher Mount Yes is. And so it's our job as dentists and our practice's job to find ways to help patients get up and over Mount Yes so that they, with appreciation and gratitude, will open their wallet, hand us all their money, and say, you can take that treatment plan, doc, and stick it right here in my mouth. Now, the next question I always ask is, okay, that's great. It sounds like a good topic. Who are you, Faye, and why should we listen to you talk about this? Well, the quick answer to that is many years ago, I had a partner and 18 employees. You can count them up there. You can date me by the hair. And we saw a lot of patients, upwards of 100 new patients a month, and we did a lot of dentistry on a lot of patients. Fast forward 30 years, and for the last probably 15 years, it's been me and these three wonderful ladies. And interestingly, in this practice, even though we see just a bare fraction of the number of patients we saw in the other practice, in this practice, we do the same amount of dentistry as we did in the other one. And that's because in the old practice, we did virtually no comprehensive dentistry, interdisciplinary dentistry. And in this practice, we do sort of more than our fair share. And the point of that is that I just didn't wake up one day and say, okay, I'm tired of doing it the high volume way. I'm going to close that office, go across town, open up another office, and do it the low volume way. Instead, I had to transform that original practice into the current one. And what I learned by going through that experience sort of is what I talk about. And it's things that I learned via the School of Hard Knocks or by the seat of my pants. And so I think I have some validity talking about it because I've been there, done that, and I know what worked, at least for me. Now you might say, all right, that's great. Well, tell me what you learned. Well, I could spend all day talking about what we learned, but one of the big core principles is that if you want to do more comprehensive restorative dentistry, then you have to, at some point, come to the understanding that it's not your clinical skill that sells comprehensive dentistry. It's your people skills. It's your soft skills. It's your relationship building skills. The patients assume you can do the dentistry, so it's not the clinical skills. After all, you have doctor in front of your name, and of course you would never try to sell them something you can't do. And the bigger the case, the more important this is. Many years ago, I read this article by Roger Levin in Dental Economics, and in it he wrote this. He says that the reason people buy anything is because they want it, they like you, and they trust you. Now let's talk about the want it part. You can educate patients to death about wanting what you think they should have, but in the real world, most patients sort of aren't going to listen. You can educate them up to a PhD level in dentistry, but sometimes they just want what they want. And so I think instead of spending a lot of time trying to educate patients, what you should do is find ways to figure out what it is they really want, and then find ways to get it to them. So let's say the patient wants your interdisciplinary treatment plan. The next thing is, do they like you? If you go into a car dealership and you're going to drop that kind of money, and you have a poor experience with the salesman, and you don't like the salesman, you're not going to buy the car. Similarly, in dentistry, if you don't get people to like you or your practice, or at least tolerating coming in, they're not going to want to buy dentistry from you. And we all know this. Any of us who are watching this tape already have figured this out, so this is not that big a deal. So let's say the patient wants the dentistry, they like you. The big one is the third one, which is the trust. And that takes time to deliver. It just doesn't happen overnight. I look at selling a few crowns as dating. Doesn't take a big relationship to go on dates. I look at selling comprehensive dentistry as more like marriage. It takes a lot of trust, and it takes a while to develop that trust. Dr. Pankey, many years ago, you can date me by the hair again here, said one of his famous things is slow down and become effective. Notice he didn't say efficient. There's nothing wrong with being efficient. He said effective. Effective at what? Effective at helping lead patients, developing relationships of trust with you, so they'll tend to say yes to your more comprehensive plans. Now, how can we help patients develop relationships of trust with us? I think that what you should do is, with your staff, take apart your something that all of us do, and at some point a new patient has to come into our office and meet us, so this is something is common to every practice, and you have a new patient exam process, or a new patient process, or what I like to call a new patient experience. And you and your staff should get together and break it down into all its steps and see if you can find ways at each step to help the patient more easily build relationships of trust with you. And this starts with, what is your reputation in your community? You don't have direct control over this. This is created by what your patients are saying about you out there in the community. But what are some things you might be able to do to help lead patients to start building relationships of trust with you before they even come in the office? Then they hear, oh, okay, I heard about that Faye, he's got a good reputation. Then they contact the office. Sometimes they walk in, but typically they call. And in our office, that means you get to speak to Alicia, who is an expert at helping lead patients to accept comprehensive care. What can she do during that initial phone call to help patients be more ready to build relationships of trust with you? If Alicia decides that the patient is appropriate for our practice, and she grants them permission to schedule a new patient exam with us, notice how I said that, what happens between the time she hangs up the phone and the patient comes in? What can happen during that window of opportunity or that window of time that helps patients build more positive relationships with you? Do you send out any information packet or brochures? Do you direct them to a website? What are the things you can do there? Then the big day arrives. The new patient shows up for their exam. Is this just a haphazard event? You know, we got a hole in the schedule next week, come on in then. Or is this what I like to call a highly orchestrated event? We spend a lot of time making this work exactly what we want, because you only get this one shot to make a good first impression. What can happen in the first 5 seconds a patient walks into your practice that helps lead them to more readily build positive, trusting relationships with you? Who do they meet? In what order do they meet the people, the staff? When do they meet you, the dentist? What can you do in the first 5 seconds of meeting somebody to help them build positive relationships with you? And then you can go through the rest of this, the preclinical interview. Do you do one? If so, where do you do it? Who does it? And the clinical exam. What can you do? There's a lot of things you can do in the clinical exam to help build relationships of trust. And then any follow-up consultation visits or review of findings or case presentations or whatever you want to call it, either that day or in another day or several days of this. So there's a whole lot of things you can do during your new patient experience to help lead patients more readily accept or more readily build positive relationships with you so they will accept your comprehensive treatment plans. And the reason this is important, the reason you should try to spend, we're all used to spending time building our clinical skills. What we really need to understand is that it's important to build our soft skills, our relationship building skills, because of course, it's not your clinical skills that are going to sell big case dentistry. I appreciate you listening. That brings us to the sunset of our day, and look forward to meeting any of you down the line. And aloha.